The wind carried the scent of rust and cold earth across Millstone Correctional Facility, curling through gaps in the crumbling stone walls. Somewhere beyond the perimeter, a K-9 let out a howl, low, aching and unervingly human. The sound rolled over the yard like a warning. Guards exchanged uneasy glances. Whispers began to spread. Beneath the shadow of the watchtower, Officer Mara Jenkins adjusted her flashlight, her breath forming clouds in the damp night air. What lay behind those walls wasn't just prison history. It was something older, something the ground had been trying to hide. If you find this story gripping, remember to like and subscribe. The truth gets stranger from here. Rain fell in uneven sheets that night, sharp as shards, rattling the iron roof above the millstone yard. The prison sat isolated, wedged between jagged woodland and a churning river. No one came here unless they were locked inside, or ordered to. Officer Mara Jenkins pulled her jacket tighter as she walked toward the northern wall, her boots squelched in the mud. Behind her, the prison gates loomed black against the storm, the floodlights flickering under heavy clouds. Somewhere deep inside the yard, the K-9, a German shepherd named Tracker, rose to his feet and began to howl, a sound that seemed almost deliberate, as though he understood something the human guards did not. Mara frowned. She wasn't used to the dog acting this way. Tracker was loyal, but he wasn't obedient to emotion. The sound carried over the yard, bouncing off stone and barbed wire. Somewhere inside the prison, inmates stirred. Some leaned toward the walls, listening. Others curled away from them, pulling their blankets closer. Captain Rowe approached her silently, his coat dripping water. His face was pale under the brim of his hat. "You hear that, too?" he said quietly. "It's the dog," Mara said. "He's been doing it for an hour." Rowe shook his head. "No, this is different." His voice had the weight of a warning. He glanced toward the wall, his eyes narrowing. Something's behind it. Mara glanced over her shoulder toward the yard. Behind the towering stone wall, there was only darkness. But Tracker's howl had stopped. Now there was silence. The kind of silence that felt like the moment before a storm breaks. Rowe gestured toward a small crowd of guards huddled near the control room. "We'll have to dig." Mara's brow tightened. "Dig? It's been sealed for decades." "That wall hides something," Rowe said. His voice was quiet enough that Mara had to lean in. "Something Millstone doesn't want anyone to find." She hesitated. There were rumors about Millstone Correctional Facility. Whispers of secret cells, unmarked graves, experiments, and cover-ups. But those were just stories. Urban legend meant to frighten rookies. Mara had never given them much thought. Until tonight. The command came at 0200. Officers and guards gathered tools, floodlights, and cameras. Tracker was led forward, his leash taut. Mara followed quietly, feeling a tension she couldn't explain. The wind carried the scent of wet earth and something older, something metallic. The wall was thick stone, older than the prison itself. Moss clung to its base, and the mortar was crumbling. The guard began to chip away with pickaxes. Mara's flashlight illuminated the faces of her colleagues. Grim, exhausted, most kept their eyes on the work. Tracker stood nearby, ears pricked, breathing slow and deliberate. "Here," a guard muttered, breaking stone free. The sound of the impact echoed through the yard. Tracker barked sharply, his hackles raised. Rowe stepped forward. "Stop. Everyone stop." Tracker's gaze was fixed on something inside the wall, something unseen. His low growl deepened into a whisper of a snarl. Mara's chest tightened. She glanced at Rowe. "What is it?" Rowe didn't answer. He pulled out his phone, flicking through messages. Mara noticed his hands tremble slightly. There was a reason he was here at this hour. A sudden crack sounded, sharpened before. The stone wall gave way with a groan. Dust and moss fell into a narrow cavity. Floodlights revealed a gap, a dark tunnel, deep enough that the light didn't reach its end. Mara swallowed. The air that came out was cold. It smelled of earth and something else she couldn't name, decay. Tracker's growl became a howl again, this one sharper, urgent. Rowe stepped closer to the opening, flashlight in hand. "That's it," he said, voice low. "That's what I was talking about." A guard glanced at Mara. Should we call it in? Rose shook his head. Not yet. Not until we know what's there. The decision was made without the usual chain of command. Someone had to see. Tracker moved forward first, sniffing the air at the tunnel's mouth. Mara watched him hesitate. His paw froze mid-step. Then he barked once, long and low, and backed away. Ro looked at Mara. We'll go in, he said, but just a few of us. No one else. Mara nodded. They drew straws quietly. Mara's was the shortest. She would go. Ro handed her a flashlight and a radio. Stay in touch. If anything happens, his voice trailed off. Inside, the air was colder. The stone was slick with moisture, and water dripped somewhere deeper in the tunnel. Mara's boots echoed softly. She could hear Tracker's faint whine behind her. Something in the dark moved. Not a rat. Not wind. Something deliberate. They walked deeper. The tunnel narrowed, forcing Mara to stoop. Her light caught scratches on the walls, deliberate marks, as though someone had carved them. The symbols were rough, jagged. They made her stomach turn. Rose's voice came through her radio. Mara, you seeing this? Yes, she whispered. Her voice cracked. What is it? Rose's answer was another silence. Then Tracker barked again, not at the wall, but deeper still. A sound echoed back. Something metallic, dragging. Mara froze. Her flashlight flickered. For a moment, she thought she heard voices. Low murmurs, unintelligible. Rose spoke urgently. Come back. Now. Mara hesitated. The tunnel stretched farther, swallowing the light. Behind her, the howl began again, low, mournful, unending. Something inside the prison walls was awake. Something that had been waiting for them to find it. The air shifted. Cold seeped into her bones. Mara glanced over her shoulder. The tunnel seemed alive. She should turn back. But curiosity and something darker urged her forward. Mara's boots slipped in the wet muck. Her flashlight beam trembling as she moved deeper into the tunnel. Rose stayed close behind, his own light slicing through the darkness like a blade. Tracker trailed him silently now, ears pinned back, moving with unnatural caution. The air felt heavier the farther they went. It was no longer just cold. It carried weight, like breathing underwater. Mara's breath came in short bursts, echoing softly against the stone. Somewhere ahead, the scratching marks grew sharper. They seemed deliberate, almost ritualistic, etched deep into the wall with precision. What do you think this is? Mara whispered, not wanting to disturb the suffocating silence. Rose's voice was low. Something we were never meant to find. They rounded a bend and entered a larger chamber, not a natural cavern, but clearly man-made. The walls were slick with moisture, and the smell of iron was strong. Mara's light landed on a heap of objects piled in the corner. Twisted metal scraps, fragments of uniforms, rotting leather boots, and something that made her stomach knot. A human skull, its jaw cracked, eyes missing. Rose stopped, his breath caught. God, I thought this was sealed. Mara crouched to examine the skull. There was something carved into it, a symbol that matched the scratches in the tunnel walls. Tracker let out a long, low growl behind her, his hackles rising again. Mara glanced over her shoulder, uneasy. You hear that? She whispered. Ro nodded, frowning. Voices. They were faint, almost a murmur, coming from deeper in the chamber. Mara strained to listen. The sound was too low to make out words, but it wasn't wind. It was deliberate, rhythmic, like chanting. Who's down there? She asked. Rose shook his head. No one. At least no one alive. He stepped forward. Mara followed, though her gut screamed for her to stop. Tracker padded beside her, occasionally snapping his head toward unseen movement. Mara tried to call out, but her voice caught. The sound behind them, a soft dragging, was too loud to ignore now. They came to a second chamber. The walls here were carved with more symbols, and in the center lay a narrow pit dug into the floor. Inside was a bundle wrapped in oilskin. Ro approached, kneeling slowly. This, he murmured. He pulled back the cover. Mara stepped forward. Her breath caught. Inside was a body. Not fresh, but not entirely decomposed either. Its face was hidden beneath cloth. The air smelled of rot, and something worse. Something alive. Ro pulled the cloth away. Mara blinked hard at what she saw. The face was intact, but the skin was pale and taut like wax. The eyes were wide open, glassy and fixed in a silent scream. "Jesus," Mara whispered. Ro's jaw tightened. "We need to call it in." Tracker barked suddenly, sharp, loud, panicked. Mara spun toward him, but he was already gone, slipping silently into the darkness beyond the chamber. "Tracker!" Ro shouted, but the dog didn't answer. His bark echoed, distant now. Mara's pulse pounded in her ears. Ro stepped toward her. "We should leave." She shook her head. "No, not until we know what's down here." Ro's eyes narrowed. "You really want to know? Once you see it, there's no going back." Mara swallowed. The chanting sound grew louder, not from ahead, but from the walls themselves. A deep vibration hummed through the stone. Tracker's howl rose again, cutting through the air like a blade. Ro grabbed Mara's arm. "This isn't just a tunnel. This is a cell. And whatever's in there, it was never meant to be found." They followed the sound deeper, stepping past the pit, through a narrow corridor slick with water and moss. The air grew colder still. Mara felt a pressure in her chest, like the walls were closing in. Tracker was ahead again, barking softly now, but not out of fear. It was a warning. They came to a final chamber. The walls here were carved with hundreds of the same jagged symbols, glowing faintly in the light of their flashlights. At the center was a doorway carved into stone, too perfect to be natural. Beyond it was blackness deeper than the tunnel. Ro stepped forward. "This is it." Before Mara could speak, Tracker let out the longest howl yet, a sound that filled every corner of the chamber. It wasn't just a warning. It was a plea. Ro paused. "We can't go in. We need to seal this." Mara's curiosity flared against her better instincts. "Why? What's in there?" Ro's face tightened with something between fear and regret. Something they buried, something they killed to hide. And it's still alive. Tracker barked again, urgent and deep. Mara took a step forward toward the doorway. Ro grabbed her shoulder. "You can't. Trust me. Once it gets out." His voice broke. The chanting grew louder now, not from inside the tunnel, but in their minds. Low, guttural words they couldn't understand, as if the wall itself was speaking. Mara's breath caught. "Ro, it's calling us." Ro pulled her away. "We go back. Now." But Mara glanced at the doorway one last time. Her fingers itched to push forward. Behind that wall was the truth. And whatever it was, she knew she could never stop herself from finding it. Somewhere behind them, Tracker howled again, long, deep, and filled with warning. The howl echoed across the prison walls, and for the first time Mara understood. This was no ordinary prison. This was a tomb, and they had just begun to open it. The air outside the tunnel felt heavier when Mara emerged. Rain still fell in cold sheets, but the yard was quiet now. The howl of Tracker had stopped. That absence, more than the sound itself, sent a chill down Mara's spine. Ro followed her, dragging his boots through the mud, his face pale under the floodlights. Behind them, the rest of the guards moved cautiously, keeping their distance from the tunnel entrance. The moment felt charged, as if the prison itself was holding its breath. Mara glanced back at the stone doorway in the tunnel. The jagged symbols carved there seemed to glow faintly still, as if alive. She tried to tell herself she was imagining it, but deep down, she knew they were wrong to leave it alone. Ro spoke first. "We call it in now. Full lockdown. Nobody touches this until we get reinforcements." Mara hesitated. "That's not what I heard you saying before." Ro's jaw tightened. "Because before we weren't sure what was down there. Now we do." Her brow furrowed. "And what exactly is that?" Ro glanced over his shoulder toward the stone wall. His voice dropped. "Something Millstone was built to bury. A crime that doesn't just rot in memory, but in the earth itself. You don't want to know what it is." Tracker let out a sudden bark behind them, sharp and urgent. Every guard turned toward him, but he was staring at the tunnel entrance. His growl was low, almost mournful. Then Mara heard it again, the sound, That deep chanting coming from the stone itself. Low, rhythmic, incomprehensible. It wasn't coming from inside the tunnel. It was coming from every wall, every stone a millstone. Mara's breath caught. It's everywhere. Ro shook his head. No, it's coming from behind the walls. Before she could respond, Tracker darted forward and disappeared into the tunnel. Mara grabbed Ro's arm. We have to go after him. No, Ro said sharply. We're sealing this. Now. But Mara pulled free. We can't. Not after what we saw. Whatever's in there, it's alive, Ro. We need to know what it is. Ro looked at her for a long moment, then stepped aside without protest. Mara moved toward the tunnel mouth, her flashlight slicing through the darkness. Ro followed reluctantly, his hand hovering near his gun. Inside, the air was worse than before, thick with moisture and something rotting. Tracker's barks echoed far ahead, muffled but insistent. The chanting grew louder, pulling them forward. It felt like it was inside their skulls now, not outside. They came to the stone doorway. The symbols glowed faintly, pulsing. Tracker was at the entrance, barking frantically, his body tense. Mara stepped closer. Ro grabbed her shoulder. Don't. But she moved past him. Her hand touched the stone. The moment her skin made contact, a shiver ran through her body, sharp as a knife. The chanting became clearer, low guttural words she couldn't understand, but somehow knew. It wasn't just language. It was a summons. Ro's voice came behind her. Stop, Mara. She turned. I can't. Something shifted in the darkness beyond the doorway. The chanting stopped abruptly. The air went still. Then a figure stepped forward. It was Tracker, but not Tracker as they knew him. His eyes were glowing faintly orange. His body moved stiffly, unnaturally. His snarl was low, human-like. Mara stepped back. Ro raised his gun. God help us. The figure spoke, not with words, but with a sound that made Mara's stomach turn. Tracker, whatever he was now, stepped forward toward her. His voice echoed in her mind. You should not have come. The tunnel walls groaned, and the air vibrated with the sound of the chanting returning. Ro fired his gun, but the bullet struck stone and ricocheted. Tracker lunged, and Mara stumbled backward into Ro, both of them falling hard to the ground. The world seemed to collapse into noise. Roaring chants, Tracker's growls, the pounding of their own hearts. The stone doorway began to shift, revealing a deeper darkness beyond, a place that seemed to breathe. Ro shouted, Mara, get out! But Mara froze. Something inside the darkness pulled at her. It wasn't fear. It was understanding. The figure before them, the dog, was guarding it, protecting it, calling them in. Ro grabbed her again, dragging her back. No, we're sealing this. Whatever it is, it stays buried. But Mara shook him off. We can't. Not after what we found. Ro's face broke into a grim mask. You're going to get us all killed. Mara stepped forward. Tracker growled low. The chanting stopped. Then a sound came, a whisper unmistakable, coming from beyond the wall. Let her in. Something in Mara's mind broke. She stepped forward into the darkness. Ro grabbed her arm once more. You trust her? A voice came from behind them. It was another guard, and the question hung heavy. Ro didn't answer. He pulled Mara backward. Hard. She stumbled but refused to give ground. Tracker barked once, a long, mournful sound, and lunged toward her. She froze. The dog stopped inches from her face, then collapsed, whimpering. His body convulsed and went still. Mara gasped. Ro pulled her away. The chanting returned, low and rhythmic, and the stone wall seemed to breathe with it. Mara turned for one last look at the doorway before they sealed it. The thing inside didn't try to stop them. As the wall closed, the yard fell silent. The floodlights flickered. Rain fell harder. Tracker's howl was gone. They returned to the guardhouse in silence. Mara's mind was racing, but Ro said nothing. The others avoided her eyes. The prison felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves were watching. Later, in her bunk, Mara lay awake, haunted. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen. The chanting, the symbols, the thing behind the wall, and the voice that whispered to her. She reached for her phone. A single message flashed across the screen. No number, no name, just words. They know you've opened it. Somewhere beyond Millstone's walls, Tracker's howl echoed again, low, mournful, and endless. And Mara knew she would never be the same.